Okay. We are live. So thank you, this amazing panel of four rock stars for joining me and signing up for a little bit of unpredictability of these live streams. But as people are going to start joining here, the purpose of this is, we really like to lean into these shop talks, which is really just conversation amongst peers who are solving the same problems in different areas, working with the same fleets in different applications. And we've been to a lot of conferences where it feels like the best learnings come from the conversations in the halls and in the receptions and happy hours. So we wanted to sort of carve out a formal place for that. And, the in-person events have been really successful. So bringing it to this online format, which so far has been received really, really well. So I'm very happy to introduce this new panel of four. So we're going to start to go around the room and do quick introductions, and then we're going to get into the main topic, which is scaling maintenance. So to tee this up, before we get into introductions, the reason I was very interested in this topic is that a lot of fleet teams that we talk to are dealing with two sort of counteracting forces. One, it's historic backlogs, meaning bigger fleets, more work, but two, a growing labor gap and fewer people to do it and more complex machines to fix. And so you have these sort of counteracting forces, and you guys are in the middle trying to make sure you don't get ripped in half. So I think enough people are dealing with the same sort of feeling that I figured it was very much worth having a conversation about. So to kick things off, I would love maybe for Saul, you to start and just introduce your name, your role, your company, give us a little bit of a perspective on what Ryan Southern does and the size of your fleet and operation. And we'll kind of go around the virtual room from here.
Okay, cool. Thanks, Ben. My name is Saul. I'm with Ryan Incorporated, 140-year company. We do mining, civil work. We have our quarry at Star Quarries. We do everything, road, underground, heavy dirt. We've been around for some time now, and we've been learning to adapt with the new fleets of today. And our look forward is to try to grow. We're currently sized at about 250 pieces of equipment, obviously expanding different portions of the business as well, and a sister company with Ryan Golf as well.
And what do you do for them, Saul?
Yeah, I like to try to tell people I'm a jack of all trades and master of none. We are basically manage the fleet, the equipment, on-road vehicles. We're kind of the catch-all when it comes to maintenance.
Awesome. All right, Gil, you don't mind going next?
Yeah, no problem. Gilbert. Been with S&B USA for a couple of years now, working on this Fargo-Moorhead flood diversion project, one of the largest civil projects in the country right now. 55 million cubic yards of earth excavation, 19 bridges, 2 aqueducts. I work for S&B Fay, who is a joint venture in this project, along with helping the S&B Fay group out of Pittsburgh and kind of working with their fleet director on some best practices and that kind of stuff. Been doing this stuff for been going on 44 years now. So
awesome. Well, very happy you're here, and Gil and I go way back to the back of the napkin drawing of what Gearflow could look like. So it's always fun to come full circle here. Julia, how about you go next, if you don't mind?
Good morning. I'm Julia Salgueiro. I'm the Director of Operational Efficiency here at West Valley Construction. My background is from construction operations. I was a project engineer, project manager for quite some time, and kind of found my way into this role where I really stepped into making the company operations more efficient. So that really does include the fleet quite a bit. When you look at running a successful construction operation, having uptime on the fleet is important. So yeah, I've been working with fleets for the past 7 years to improve the efficiency of how that department works as a part of the whole. If you're talking about, an entire construction outfit. So it's been pretty great so far.
Awesome. And Justin.
Justin Smith, and previously before my current role that I'm sitting in, it was a maintenance and reliability consultant, where I worked with a lot of heavy civil companies, whether it was dirt moving or whether it was asphalt paving, concrete, ready mix, you name it. Just here recently, starting in May, I've taken on a full-time role as a VP of Asset and Logistics for March Clearing and Grading. We're a big dirt moving company. We move a lot of dirt, but we also do the clearing side and the utility side. So we do a lot of site work and site development, and then we also do some on the infrastructure side. And my role here is to not only manage the fleet and the shop and everything that goes along with it, but also help with putting in all of the systems and implementing a lot of the things that need to be put in place to be able to make a lot of these improvements, similar to what Julie is doing in her role, is what we're doing here at Marks here as we grow.
Awesome. Well, before we get into some questions, so for those that have joined, feel free to drop comments in the chat at any time. This is very much supposed to be as conversational as possible. We're not going to kind of have Q&A sections. So as you have questions come up or you just have perspective you want to share, definitely drop it in. And we will either pull up your comment on stage or ideally pull you up on this virtual stage to kind of share a little bit about it. So I'll intermittently remind everyone to do that, because the more engaging it is, the better these conversations are. So I'm going to start with you, Saul. Our first kind of set of questions we were talking about is sort of setting the scene. So if you don't mind, from your seat at Ryan Southern, what's putting the most pressure on your maintenance operation today that wasn't there maybe 3 to 5 years ago?
Our maintenance side, a lot of the pressures that we face are the constant change in technology of the equipment. Adapting to that. A lot of this newer stuff, with all the electronics and everything, it's hard to dive a little deeper. So with that being said, it does create a stranglehold when it comes to parts and finding the right parts and diagnosing problems out in the field. So that's the biggest stranglehold right now for us. We did have an issue with parts and procurement, but we've since adopted the Gearflow product, and it's helped us bridge the gap on something that we had a lot of questions on and not a lot of answers. And now I feel like we have a place where we can go to and find those answers. I think obviously everyone's stressed right now when it comes to fleets is mechanics. And what we tried to do to bridge that gap of between the ages and the knowledge, we've reached out to colleges and nearby to try to bring on apprentices and have them work with us directly and mold them into guys that were training to work on diesel trucks versus now coming on to the construction equipment side. That's where we found the most success, is trying to get people young into the industry and mold them into the way we do things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm going to actually piggyback back off of that to you, Julia. So, in our kind of prep call, we talked about that exact problem. I know you guys, West Valley have a reputation for being, deliberate about the operational efficiency. So you kind of talked about, your 2-step process, which is first figure out where our time is being spent, and then second, figure out what to do with that time. So do you mind kind of pulling us into that a little bit more in the same vein and maybe hit on, some of the things Saul talked about with the labor gap issues on technicians?
Yeah, thanks. I'd be happy to. So once we implemented a centralized tracking system with HCSS Equipment 360, we were able to start dialing in tracking more specific activity codes, if you will. And so that led us down a path of mechanics were spending their time on when they were not working on heavy equipment. So we are a union outfit, right? So we have very specific requirements when it comes to who can work on our equipment. But we found that mechanics were doing a lot of local management responsibilities, and even working on smaller tools. And so based on the amount of time spent there, yes, they are mechanically inclined. And we want to put those mechanically inclined folks not only to work on working on heavy equipment, but also potentially mentoring a new generation of mechanically inclined folks. And we can start them on working on smaller tools where that doesn't necessarily require someone to join the union right away if they're unsure about that. And it gives us more flexibility to bring in more people and start mentoring towards a more experienced mechanic, whether they want to focus on highway fleet or heavy off highway equipment.
Yeah, I love that. It's a little bit of both strategy with working with union territories plus building you called it like your farm league.
Yes.
Yeah, that's actually actionable today versus going all the way to grammar school and starting that process that might hopefully bear some fruit in a decade from now too, which is important. But we have problems to solve today. So, to segue to you, Justin, for a minute here. So your perspective is amazing because both from working with fleet teams across the country on their maintenance operations, but then also being, relatively new to Mark's Clearing, and that's being in the seat there. So what's your sort of honest take from your purview, in what gets in the way of companies successfully scaling, particularly around this people issue but opportunity that Julia and Saul referenced?
Yeah, I mean, and that's, and my take is, and that's what it is. When you look at a company that is growing or has grown at a rapid pace, you kind of wonder, like, where are the pain points coming from? And so as you're growing, you're aware of a lot of the things that were either inefficient or things that you felt that you probably would need to change down the road. And what happens with the growth is that you find out how important those changes were, and you wish that you could have gone back and changed them before then. You didn't realize how much pain and what type of bottleneck you were going to run into until you're at that point. And then it's, I got to hurry up and change it, and I needed it changed yesterday. And as we know, that's not how this works. And things normally take more time than anything. And it's not even something that you can just throw money at. It's just taking the time and getting with the right people to figure out how it needs to look for your company. Because I'm a prime example. Every company is different. Their systems, their people, their teams, their cultures, and those are all things that have to be taken into account when you're looking at restructuring and making changes to be able to sustain that growth and then be able to continue to grow beyond that. And so scaling is not a problem. It's an opportunity, but it does exploit a lot of weaknesses, and then sometimes it exploits them at a point to where it's, causes rapid change where things feel like it's almost like a clown show hair on fire. Everything has to be addressed immediately. And it's like, well, we were kind of running this way for years now, and now it's all of a sudden you start getting more of, to Julia's point, as you start getting more of the data and you see more of the trends and you see where your time is being spent and your resources and where they're being applied, it's now alarming. It really hasn't changed. It's just now that you can associate a number with it, or a dollar figure, or how many resources you're having to apply to something because of the inefficiency. And then it starts causing companies to want to change, whether that's bringing on staff or buying all kinds of systems, thinking that we can just smash an easy button. There's a lot of good systems that are out there. I'll tell you, Gearflow being one, I used a lot. But it doesn't mean that systems and technology is always the answer. It's not always the easy button that you can press. A lot of it's just you have to look internally and look at your processes and kind of lay them out and to make sure that you've got the right people, involved with making those changes so they're bought into it.
Yeah, we're going to come back to that because I think there's like the two-step process of evaluating where you're at today, and there's all sorts of different ways to figure out, do we have you talked about the right butts in the right seats to sort of sharpen the axe before we start scaling. But then it's also layering on some of the change management pieces in order to set yourselves up for that. So Gil, I know we talked about this as well as also aligning incentives, right? So a key, I think, friction that we see a lot is, hey, like Julia, you mentioned, we want our mechanics spending as much time with as possible turning wrenches, but surprise, mechanics are paid hourly, right? So there's a little bit of a misincentive there. And, maybe because I'm soft and don't work in the field, which is definitely true. But I would not necessarily want to be spending every waking hour turning wrenches. I might like my drives to the dealership or my phone call time. But you brought up that also, you see that on the job site as well, right? And how you guys are monitoring other things that revolve to maintenance, whether it's inspections or idle time. So can you tell us about a bit of a story, Gil, of, how you evaluated that, what incentives were misaligned, and how you align those to change the, certain behavior that you were seeing on the job?
Well, I think one of the most recent examples I can give is, on this particular project, 90% of the repair and maintenance is done through contract maintenance and repair. We did hire a small staff of 4 or 5 technicians to handle, like oil changes and stuff that wasn't under contract or damages and stuff like that. What we found is those mechanics, because being, here in Fargo and keeping people here, we have to pay a very high rate for mechanics. And once we put we put telematics on everything. And once we put GPS and telematics on the mechanics trucks, we were finding, at the time, they spent a lot of time chasing parts. And everybody, the big claim here is you can get from one side of Fargo to the other side of Fargo in 15 minutes, which is true. But 10 trips in 15 minutes a day adds up. So we were able to actually track how much money was being spent just chasing parts. And we were able to hire a parts runner, semi-parts guy, and save money. So, a lot of that stuff you don't think about, and like you said, mechanics are people. They love getting on talking on the phone. And maybe their cousin Bob works at Napa, and, they're sitting there and their 5-minute conversation turns into a 50-minute deal, which is all fine. I don't have a problem with people socializing. But when I'm paying them, $68, $70 an hour, that's a little bit different. You want them, especially when on a project like this, the availability of the equipment, the uptime of the equipment is a very highly tracked KPI here.
Mm-hmm. So, yeah, I guess similarly, I think we got a comment here. We're going to see if Chuck's willing to come up on our virtual stage to do it. But in the meantime, you also brought up something ancillary, right? Which is you're looking at idle time specifically, hopefully, so that it kind of relates to the scale and maintenance side. You don't want to spend so much money on fuel, and obviously you don't want to wear the equipment down. Idle time is another classic example of a hard misaligned, incentive to try to reduce that idle time. You had a good example there of how you spotted it and drove that change too. Do you mind pulling us into that as well? I think that was a kind of a cool creative thing that a lot of people could learn from.
Yep. Says here, how do you address the reluctance of people actually use tech systems consistently and accurately? The easy short answer is, it's not an option. It's technology. We embrace it. The company embraces it. There's going to be, certain cultures or certain mindsets that don't want to use it. But, at the end of the day, if the company believes that it helps their bottom line, it helps the system, then to be a part of that company, you have to embrace it. And, if you don't want to embrace that, then I'm sure there's other places out there that don't desire to use the tech, and that's fine.
Well, I think we actually have Chuck here, so maybe we can bring him on, and there we go. I love it. Thanks for being brave, Chuck, and joining us. So, yeah, do you want to pull us in a little bit more to that question and see how the rest of the group?
Well, I'm definitely I grew up in the telematics business and the wireless business and fleet business, so to speak. So I hate to date myself, but I probably got 35, 40 years in this business. And one of the challenges I face is, we run a lot of Trimble applications like TMT maintenance software, for example. And to get the people in the shops to understand the importance of that has been somewhat challenging. I was brought on a year ago. I ran my own fleet consulting business for about 15 years. But a year ago, I was hired by a company where I work now, CWPM, and we're a large refuse and recycling operation. So we have about 300 trucks, that are $500,000 a piece. And we have probably another 200 pieces of heavy equipment that is way above that. So getting people to understand, historically their job was, they felt their job was to fix the flipping trucks, And I'm like, yeah, that's your job, but you also need to document what you do, so we can track PMs, for example, or chronic repairs and so on. And I've struggled with not just the mechanics or technicians, so to speak, but even the executive team. They're like, oh, it's hard to get good drivers. It's hard to get mechanics that want to work on garbage trucks, so they're not too hard on them. And I would wholeheartedly agree with what Gil mentioned. My thought is, hey, it's your flipping job, no disrespect, but maybe you can find a shop that doesn't use computers, and I'm just curious how other people have handled that.
I think it's one of those things that, we adopted. When I came into Ryan, we used paper for time cards.
Mm-hmm.
Guys filled them out, and it caused a lag in what our cost was on equipment. And we always had E360. We just never adopted it because it was too much to get these guys to go ahead and get on tablets. It was too much to do that. And the issue was, it was the mindset of our group that, hey, we can't do this before we've even tried it. And I think that's the biggest thing is, when we got into it, we spent time training with these guys. We spent time where we had Dave Katz from HESS come in. We had time where it was like, hey guys, this is what it will create for you. One of the biggest things is too, mechanics love to save time, and what's harder than writing down your paperwork than it is going onto a tablet and typing a sentence or two of what you've done. And also that streamlined data allows for your company to be more efficient, and more efficiency means more dollars in the company's pocket, which then leads to guys being able to make more. That's the issue I found with scaling, is that you can't scale with old school tools. You get stuck and you're chasing. But when you scale properly with the right tools, it makes fleet growth less painful, and it allows you to look at things in a much more in a present time manner versus looking at things in the rear, and make better decisions. A lot of companies operate where maintenance is break even. And a lot of that relies on the mechanics' hours and the people's time and the inspections in order to create efficiency. So, it directly affects their pocket, whether they believe it or not. And not adopting the tech will affect their, like you said, they'd have to go somewhere else to work. Well, what companies don't do that?
Amen.
These companies that can't adopt it, it's financially too tough to, or they just have not adopted the growth. So they should look at it as a positive thing that is happening to them. Now they are able to, our mechanics are able to order parts through their tablet. Before it was call, go to the parts place. Now we've gotten to the point where we're planning better, which makes their lives easier. Instead of yanking them off jobs and pulling them to do things, we're now being a little bit more scheduled with the way we work. And look, if we get busy, we know when to pull the trigger and outsource. It's not a knee-jerk reaction. It is a calculated move that's planned days, if not a week in advance.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I don't mean to misrepresent my question, that I am on board wholeheartedly with what you're saying. It's, I'm just curious if anybody else has had that challenge.
Absolutely.
Just one tidbit, in 2024, this company spent $10 million on parts. So when they hired me, and they weren't really tracking, it was just, you buy the part, fix the truck, get it out of here, And so I'm somewhat sarcastic. I said, well, if I can save you 10%, can I keep the $1 million? And I said, how about if I save you 25%? Can I keep the $2.5 million?
Yeah.
And it kind of opened their eyes a little bit. But, you know, when you're a pretty large operation, any vendor out there that wants your business will give you 10%, you know?
Yeah.
So I use the data for reasons like that with the executive team, you know, and it's just trying to get it. I'm more interested in getting the mechanics to buy in so that it's not big brother, it's not micromanagement, it's not, you know, watching every minute of their day. But from my perspective, what we mainly track is parts and labor, you know, on all this equipment.
And the chunks, I've ran into quite a bit of that, just around that question of trying to find folks that either one, understand it, two, want to adopt it, three, want to take the time to actually learn it and get good at it.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and it depends on whether it's a leadership position that you're trying to sell on the concept, whether it's operations or whether it's the maintenance department. All three of those have to have a different approach from what I've seen working with different companies. And obviously leadership, it's easier to sell on what the tangible result is and how much money they can look to save by driving efficiencies. From the maintenance department, you're trying to spin that same thing with them. So while it's not exactly the same as it would be with leadership, you have to make it the same. You have to find a way to put it to where it affects their pocket. And a lot of times when we say the umbrella approach to it is we say, hey, well, it affects your bonuses. Well, everything you talk to me about, you tell me affects my bonuses. And then it's like that doesn't seem to do enough unless you're a company that does monthly or quarterly bonuses, and then you tie that to different KPIs that you put in place. And so in my practice, that's what it's been, is one, you educate them, you let them know the whys behind it, because this day and time, everyone wants to know why, and it's just like my children. And I give them that answer because they're looking for information. But then once you give them the whys, you explain to them how important it is and what it does. And then you sell it with the, hey, remember this dashboard that we set up for the shop, and we talked to you exactly about how you affect certain leading indicators that are performance goals that you're after. And you give them performance goals as an individual, so they're in full control of what that looks like for them. And then you give them performance goals as a team, as a maintenance department, so you don't get yourself siloed as I'm better and they're not. I'm a 4, you're a 10. That's not what we're trying to do. But once you do that and they understand how they contribute to it, to your point, and I actually worked with a waste hauling company for quite a few years, so I understand the challenges with that. It's nasty work. And if you've ever been to a transfer station during the summertime and had to work on a piece of equipment or open the back of one that's full of garbage and lay on the floor, it's a tough environment to work in. It's a lot different than I'd much prefer the dirt and mud. I can tell you that.
Oh yeah.
You know, so it is challenging, but if you share it with them from what I've seen, you show them what's in it for them, because what gets rewarded gets repeated. I'm a firm believer in that. And that you share the value, that you start to see some more of that buy-in, but they have to understand how they control it. And then from a management perspective, the systems that you put in place allow you to be able to see, is it actual? So for an example, time charged to work orders, that's what we want to see. We want to see labor and parts charged to a work order greater than 95%. All right, well, that's an easy one. I create one work order and I spend all day on it. It only took me 2 hours to wrench, but you told me it was an 8-hour job, so I did an 8-hour job on it.
100% efficiency.
Right, 100%. You know, so that's where the support systems come in place, between the technologies that you use, the people that you put to manage it from like a planning, scheduling perspective. And they say, hey, look, no, you can't put 8 hours on that one work order. It's only supposed to take you 2. What happened? You know, and so you've got to have a checks and balance. Otherwise, it's just throw it all on a blanket work order. But that's what I've seen help, is the selling, the telling, and then being able to let them know how it impacts them, so that they can see that there's a financial gain for them as well.
I agree. Thank you.
The one thing that I was going to offer really was about providing support. So what I've observed is that, you know, construction management, we have several tiers of support on a project team. But on the fleet side, there really is a gap from mechanics to, you know, you have plenty of senior level mechanics who know the equipment, understand the different types of equipment they have in their fleet. But it's that technological, mechanical data side of operations that is a gap between what a mechanic in the shop sees versus, you know, what a manager behind a desk sees. And so what I've been trying to influence is how we need more support, whatever you want to call it, a fleet systems engineer. But I really do see a need for someone not IT, no offense to IT out there, but they have one focus. We need someone who's more attuned with the management of a fleet maintenance program, understanding the data and what's important to us, and then being able to go side by side with the mechanic to show them what we need to enter, why we need to enter, and reiterate why we need to enter this information in its accurate form. And I feel like that is missing. A fleet manager, they have larger responsibilities where they probably on a day-to-day cannot provide that one-on-one support, especially depending on a scaling fleet, how large you are, how spread out the regions. And so having boots on the ground support for a mechanic, I don't think it's really outright reluctancy, Chuck. I think it's fear of the unknown, fear of just not confident in the new technology, and they don't have the way to verbalize that. And so it's easier to say, I don't want to do that than it is to say, I don't know how to do that. Mm-hmm. So having someone available, easily accessible, can sit with them to walk them through and essentially teach them. I think that is a gap that our industry should focus on trying to fill. I mean, it's more overhead, so the bean counters will be a little bit, upset at first, but in the long run, it's just going to benefit us because not only are we going to have better mechanically inclined folks, but now they're going to understand the why and the maintenance behind the maintenance of tracking and why it's important. And that's understanding the why brings the value to them personally.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you.
One of the things that I have found very interesting in hiring a lot of mechanics, put them together, is I found it's very productive to take an old school mechanic, the guy that you're talking about that can fix a machine out of a tackle box, right? Mm-hmm. And then you have that guy, and then let's face it, some of the newer mechanics, the younger mechanics coming up, well, they spent most of their life on gaming, doing games and stuff. So intellectually, they're in tune with technology. They're in tune with that technology. Now you put those two together, and in about a year's time, you'll see them both flourish to something they've never been before. Mm-hmm. The young guy's going to learn stuff that he would have never learned in a school.
Yep.
The old guy is going to start embracing technology and realizing how important and how much easier it makes his job. So, yeah. I mean, it's important to understand their strengths, their weaknesses, and put them together. And then when you package that together, then you involve your operations people, because I can tell you, I've had jobs where we put telematics on projects, and I've had that superintendents, big brother's watching me, this, that. But once you put it all together and you put about fuel burn, you put about, idle time, and you put about lost production, non-productive time, and you start showing him and break it down into dollars and cents. The fact that this will affect his bonus, you can add a point to his margin if he just listens. And then within time, pretty soon, I've had superintendents call when their telematics went down or their dashboard went down and in a panic. Hey, I can't see this. Where's it at? So it comes a full circle, but you've got to have patience and walk it through.
Yeah, I agree.
One of the biggest points for my mechanics was historical information. A lot of these guys, who did this? When is the last time we changed it? This looks brand new. It's in your tablet. You can go into the equipment in E360. You can pull all the work orders you want. You don't have to ask. It's all there for you. So now it doesn't become a question anymore. That's why I think the tech is there. And a lot of my mechanics that were reluctant at first, they started poking around on the tablet at home or whatever, and they were like, "Oh, did you know it could do this? Did you know it could do this?" You see all these features that you have at your fingertips that you no longer need to call for. When was the last time this thing was serviced? It's all there in front of you. When is my part coming in? Here it is. It's all in front of you. You don't have to ask anymore. You've limited your phone calls and you've become more self-reliant, and that's what a lot of the guys take to, because let's face it, a lot of these guys, they're working on stuff. They don't want to talk to us. You know what I mean? They want to work on their stuff and they want to go home. Well, this is an avenue for them to make sure that they have that, ability to work on stuff without having the constant phone calls and the constant questions. So it has helped them tremendously, just being able to do their job and what they're good at, which is fix equipment.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Well, as you can tell, Chuck, this is a great question because I think it's on the minds of everyone. So I really appreciate you jumping on here. I want to go back to you, Julia, because another version of what we see often, I mean, Chuck even mentioned, $10 million on parts. You get to a certain scale where you can't just be making purchases, making decisions straight from the field and have no idea how much money you're spending or what the decisions are until invoices come in. You basically have, so there's a lot of pressure towards teams to really take a sort of a decentralized fleet model, whether it's the parts purchasing, whether it's the maintenance, or even dispatch and everything else, into more of a centralized model. So take us into kind of your path and journey there at West Valley, going through that same exact thing.
So we essentially what started was commitment first. So we started with essentially 9 standalone locations. And the first step towards centralizing the fleet was coming together with a big picture and deciding what's important to us. And that's how we decide what is to be centralized, right? We wanted to allow each of the locations to maintain their autonomy for making boots on the ground decisions for day-to-day operations. And as a centralized department, though, we needed to maintain oversight in a way to make big picture decisions and support every one of the local regions. So it ultimately started with, as you mentioned earlier, just saying, hey, we're getting this new system to track our time. Here's why it's going to help us. We're going to understand what you as individuals and individual office shops are spending your time doing so that the central team can be enlightened to how the operations are being carried out. We don't want to start with telling them how to run their shop. And so it starts with that main goal of, hey, we're just going to start with identifying, and then we can work with you on what steps we need to take as far as, tweaking our operations locally. And just that step in terms of, hey, our goal is to understand how you're spending your time because we want to work with you to make your time more efficient because your time is valuable. That is really inured the local shop managers to come to us centrally and say, hey, we're spending a lot of our time doing this. I want to track my mechanics when they spend time on that. Hey, we just did this yesterday. Should the shop be, eating that cost? No, they shouldn't. Let's track that. So we're improving communications out to all of our local regional divisions so that we centrally can help support them and really build a strong foundation for growth because, the next thing we want to do is essentially let's make 10 locations so we can be growing our company.
Yeah. No, I love that. And I think it's like this tug of war that everyone's kind of dealing with, which is it never feels like the right time to do it, but the wrong time is to wait too long to do it. Mm-hmm. And, lo and behold, you're spending, like Chuck said, $10 million on parts when you could have maybe saved or spent 75% of that. And that's just the parts side. And into the service side, I'm curious, I think, Saul, you made mention of this, but I also want to get Gil's perspective on this, but I'll start with you, Saul. So you said, understanding when to outsource service versus not, right? So you guys obviously have a pretty strong dealer network in the Florida area. And a big part of the scale is there's not a single company I've ever come across that does 100% of everything, parts, service, equipment, rental versus not, all internal, right? You're relying on these partnerships you've made with the dealers. So bring us into that. How do you guys leverage your dealers on the service side, and how do you make those decisions as to when to fix something internally versus rely on your dealers to do that?
Yeah, a lot of it has to do with the workload for the mechanics and type of workload. So, we may get something that's a little bit more tedious for a mechanic, and we say, okay, we got a guy that's good at electrical. He can spend some time on it. Our rate is much less. We're going to keep this guy on it. Oh, hey, we got another call for something else. Pulling a guy off an electrical job is, makes it very difficult for them to come back to. So, the understanding of what they're doing workload wise and what we have going on around there helps us dictate which partners to use and when. And for us, it's like having a pocket knife. You can't solve a problem trying to cut something with something that probably needs to be ripped open. You can't solve those problems like that. So we try to find the right partner for the right deal, and that goes whether it's for mechanics, tech, or just internally what we're doing here. But we try to self-perform as much as possible, and that's everybody's end goal is to do your own work and keep your people busy. But the understanding of equipment and timing and when they break down, you have to rely on those people, but use them properly. You don't want to put an OEM on a job that's going to take, it's an electrical problem. Well, the OEM is going to look at it from their perspective and how they do it. They're going to come to you with an estimate. It's going to take time. They're going to install the part. It's not going to fix it. They're going to go through their diag tree as they know it because they're the OEM. They're not going to look at it from a internal mechanic perspective who's worked on the machine for almost a whole dang life and is going, we've had this issue before, or we're looking at a problem that's related to this issue and is allowing them to do their part. So we plug those guys in on jobs that we know are going to be shortened to the point but require somebody with OEM standard to get that job done. So we plan that way. I mean, we have 9 drag lines in the state, 1960 Manitois. We're not going to put an outside mechanic on that. And if we do bring somebody as an outside, someone we know that has history in working these machines, and parts, forget about it. You're not buying parts for a Manitois. You're rebuilding that part. You're finding it in the warehouse somewhere. You're reconfiguring. So, there's so many tools out there, especially for subcontractor work right now. Heave has been a big push on the Uber for mechanics side, which I think is great for those guys. I think it's important to have that. It also keeps the OEMs in check. Not all OEMs are the same. They don't. Some of their mechanics don't know as much as your own mechanics. So you'll find that in your choices and how you deal with people, you got to make sure of that. There's OEMs that we've been like, well, they're coming to us and asking questions, or we're using a sub and they're asking the sub the questions. So we've been able to try to create a little network of people that we use and keep busy. And sometimes, the juice isn't worth the squeeze when you try to sub out. But in situations where you're tight on fleet and you need to get things going and you have people tied up on projects that if you pull them off, they're going to lose where they're at and they could possibly be gone from that machine for a few days, you create more backlog than you need to. So we've been able to just try to adapt and make decisions accordingly, but using the technology tools to go, hey, here's our workload right now. If we pull this mechanic off this job, we're not finishing our workload here. It's only going to get worse. Let's plan ahead and let's make that call right there.
I love that. I think I want to go to you, Gil, on similar question, but you're doing a big JV in Fargo, which is a little bit different than the environment that Sal's in Florida. So talk to me about, how do you mentioned the dealer partnerships, how important that is. But talk to me about how you build that ecosystem, on the job, but you make sure that decisions are still being made optimally for, the benefit of S&B.
So it was important at the beginning of this job to get contract maintenance because, here in Fargo, North Dakota, to have a whole blend of good, highly experienced independent mechanics, it just wasn't happening. We had some good people. Don't get me wrong. We do have good people, but relying on the dealership because downtime here, the amount of time it's down is more critical than the cost. So when we've got one of our big 1250s working and that machine goes down for whatever reason, and it's a brand new machine. So one, we don't have the tooling. Technicians, independent technicians don't have the training. And so we have to rely on the dealerships to do that. So the biggest thing we had to find ourselves doing is, one, did the repair fall underneath the contract maintenance? Or was it damage, abuse, or something like that? And then we have to look at, okay, the extent of the job, who can handle it? But at the end of the day, getting that piece up and running faster was more important than saving a little bit of labor dollars. Because let's face it, if you have a technician that's maybe not quite trained and trying to learn on the job, and he spends 60 hours fixing something that should take 30 hours, but the dealership guy comes out and he fixes it in 20. Well, you're not paying too much money. I mean, it's worth that. It's worth that. Not only that, and then that carries still into the warranty, because if the dealership made the repairs and it fails again, it's still under that warranty. So there's a lot of things to think about when it comes to that. Fleets that are fully have their own independent mechanics. You're going to have your specialty mechanics that are really good at this and really good at that. But again, the workload. I mean, if you got your guy who's a undercarriage and track guy, and he's got 3 undercarriages waiting for him, and you just had another undercarriage go down, you know what? You better send that sucker out, because it's going to get done. Because sometimes those mechanics start to feel overwhelmed. You overwhelm a mechanic, they make mistakes. And that's when accidents happen. That's when people get hurt. So you got to have all that into consideration. It's not just a paper number that you pull off the wall.
Mm-hmm. Justin, you went into Marks with with kind of a fresh perspective, right? These guys have been in business for a while. They continue to grow pretty quickly. So talk to me about, you came in with fresh eyes. What's the first thing, that you did to look at? What are the things that, the changes potentially that need to be made to set these guys up for the next phase of growth?
It touches a little bit on what Gil had talked about just now, and Julia earlier, is just, one, making sure that you're not overwhelming folks, that not just do you have the right people or right person, but do you have the right, support system, when I mean other people, to be able to help them. Because right now in the beginning, it's all chaos. Things aren't in place. Things are all different. Everyone's changing. The left hand doesn't know what the right hand is doing. And so therefore, we know that we're not going to be efficient in that stage. And so when you know that change is going to take time, and it's going to take 6, 9, 12 months, you've got to figure out, how do I help in between that time? What is it that I can do? Who can I put in place? What systems can I bring in, and person can I put in charge in that to take things off of your plate, whether it's a mechanic, whether it's someone in the field, whether it's someone in the shop from an administrative side, or from, managing the fleet side, whether it be DOT, inspections, insurance claims, whatever it may be. How can I help you? Because for us to be able to take someone who already has a full plate with all the expectations the company has, and then come in and say, here's all the changes we need to make, and we're not going to give you any help. We just need you to figure it out and do all the other things on top of it. From a mechanic standpoint, as well as from a staff standpoint and support side, it becomes frustrating. And you either get someone who who has an accident, or you get someone who becomes frustrated and they no longer want to be there because it's just too hard. It's too much. The bucket is running over. We got too many small rocks and not big rocks sitting in that bucket. So we got to figure out, how much of the small stuff can we take out to be able to make sure that we have all the big rocks covered. And that's a lot of time is bringing more people. You can never have too many people, and be careful when I say that, because we always don't want the overhead going too high. But Marks has done a really good job of taking a look internally. Who do we have that is not completely stretched thin? Who do we have that has certain skill sets that we know this is not going to be a need for 12 months, but if we can let them have a portion of this for the next 90 days or the next 4 or 5 months, and it's only going to give them an extra 10 or 15% workload increase, but we feel that they can handle it, comfortably, then we use those folks and leverage who we have internally, so we don't increase overhead and then all of a sudden have to either find homes or have people look for different positions, or, obviously not have them with the company anymore. So looking internally to see who we can have that can help whatever initiative that it is that we're driving at that moment. Who do we have that can help on the inside versus trying to find someone from the outside to always fill that position. Because whether it's a mechanic, whether it's a person operating a piece of equipment, or whether it's someone trying to understand how they can better help your fleet, to hire from the outside is challenging. no matter which one of those roles you're filling. So that's a lot of what Marks has done, is really tried to take a look inside and see what we can do and leverage the strengths that we have already.
Mm-hmm. That's great. I'm going to roll right into the next question. But before I do, we have 10 minutes left. So for those of you who are still listening and you have comments, please drop them in, and, get some of the responses from these guys. I think, we don't, or you can save it and follow up afterwards, but I would be pretty mad at you if you do. So anyways, drop that in as we keep going here. But, Justin, you kind of hit on a main, I guess, scaling, inhibitor or prohibitor, if I'm using the right word, which is sort of the capacity of your current team. And you have really valuable, highly talented people that maybe their capacity, they're stretched thin with things that don't have a high strategic impact on the business. So maybe pointing you, Saul, first, then I want to go to you, Julia, with the same question. What's one, knowing that you can't just hire more people and throw people at problems, what's one process change that you did in the last year that might have, had an outsized impact on the capacity of your, highly talented folks that you have today to be more strategic or have a higher impact on the business?
Yeah. So to answer your question, I'm going to go back to what we were during COVID years, and we took on. We had a port job that required us to dredge, put a notch inside the Port Everglades. Then we had 3 water management district projects that took off at the same time. And parts and service were near impossible. Those days were your phone rang from 4 till 6, 7 o'clock. And you just had enough time to just eat dinner and close your eyes, and you got back to it the next day, and it was just constant panic button. You didn't know where parts were, you just kind of did. And it cost us a lot of money in this department. We had the same amount of people that we had in this department that we do now. And we're able to scale a lot better because we have E360. Because we have Gearflow for parts, and Gearflow for parts has helped us. I wear my badge proudly. People say, hey, what do they pay me? I'm like, nothing. They gave me something that I could use as a tool that helped me bridge a gap in a place where, I was literally just, frustrated with parts. You think about the cost that goes into that, the returns, the wrong part, the constant wondering of where they are. Where are all these parts that we spent all this money on? The use of Gearflow has allowed us to not only get the correct pricing that we need for parts, but it's also allowed my team to breathe. Now, when we look to scale, it's not this huge task of how many more purchasers can we add? That's the old school way of thinking. This company, a long time ago, they had 3 and 4 purchasers. They had 3 and 4 accounting people just handling billing and all that. Those times are gone. If you have to do that, you're really undertaking a massive overhead cost that not really yielding you more production. When you have systems in place, yes, you can add a purchaser for sure, but the purchaser that we have now has been able to find vendors at better pricing and been able to collaborate with new vendors and see products that we weren't able to get before. The easy button was the OEM, right? For many years, easy button, get it from the OEM. You're going to get it from the OEM. But now with the internet, a lot of these warehouses that are being built, we pay for that when the OEM. They have a front desk person. They got 6 or 7 counter people, and they have all this support back there, but it goes in the cost of the price of the part. But then you have these big warehouses that have call centers and they have computers. And, with the advancement of that, we need to advance our process as well. They don't want to get phone calls from us all the times. Hey, can you send me a quote? How about this? I'm going to give you a number, and that's all I'm going to give you. You got to write down the number. The days of the purchaser with the notepad with what they ordered, the PO next to it, the part number, who ordered it, and then you have that giant pamphlet. And when the guy goes on vacation, you're like, where is that pamphlet at? So I could flip through it real quick and see what did he order that or did he not? Those things are gone. You know, people can take vacation. People can, take time off. We can pick up things where people left off a lot easier with the tech that's been given to us with the integration of Gearflow and E360.
It's awesome. I'll pay you later.
I actually prefer a tier.
Yeah. Well, Julia, I know we only have 4 minutes left, but I'm really interested if you get your 1 to 2 minute answer on this. But centralizing a process also comes with, the risk of creating some bottlenecks, right? If decisions are running through singular people. So talk to me about that. How have you unlocked sort of the decision-making capacity for folks to prevent those bottlenecks, whether it's process or technology that you've implemented to make that happen?
Thanks. Yeah. I think establishing regular follow-up is really important so that we're getting that two-way communication and feedback, right? So it was already pretty well established here to have kind of weekly check-ins with each of the 9 shop locations that we have. And now we are elevating that communication to focus on the metrics that we have decided to establish as like a central. KPIs were mentioned earlier, like what key performance indicators are we focused on centrally, and then we afford each of the 9 shop managers to provide feedback, not only about the performance indicators, the metrics that we centrally have identified as a focus, but also what's going on with them locally. And it really, much like this shop talk, it's meant to be a collaboration so that we're sharing ideas and problems across the company so that mechanics can feed off of each other. I mean, yes, I get to come in and listen to, how's it going with E360 and the data there. But mechanics will talk about, a particular make and model of a vac trailer or a trenching machine that they're having problems with. And the NorCal shop foreman will communicate to the SoCal shop foreman, hey, this is how we fix that. So we really bring everyone together as a team, even though we are so separate. And allows us to build the camaraderie towards this bigger goal, which is to overall be successful as a fleet team. And then we do reiterate regularly how our fleet team contributes to the greater good of the company as a whole. So I feel like that regular touch point is critical. Just an hour a week. That's all it takes.
Well, with 2 minutes left, I'm going to attempt my lightning round, but maybe just have time for Gil and Justin to give their 1 minute answers. But it's a good segue to you, Gil, the margin makers, right? The trademark Gil Gilbert. I'm surprised it's not on your hat. But if to hit on that, if you could go back and tell yourself one thing before the fleet you were managing started to grow and grow and grow, what's one piece of advice you would give for either yourself back in those days or for a newcomer, that might be listening here? What's one thing you would do to set yourself up for success?
Spend 90% of your time listening and only 10% of your time talking. I
love it. I think to the sentiment of that statement, I'm going to move to Justin. I think that's perfect. Justin, I'll ask you the same thing. You've seen a lot of different fleets as well. What's one piece of advice you'd give for a new fleet manager to set themselves up for success?
I like Gil's answer. That's why I tell folks all the time, there's a reason God gave us 2 ears and 1 mouth. We should listen better than we speak. So I love it. I would just say, when you go to a doctor, how many people are there to help that doctor and how much time do you actually get to spend? Look at your shop, look at your maintenance department, look at your mechanics. Your mechanics are doctors. Do your doctors have the support to be able to do what doctors do when you go to be visited? If you don't have the support for your doctor, then it's going to be hard for you to be successful. So ask yourself that question. Are you prepared to do triage? Are you prepared to be efficient and get people in and out of your waiting room?
I love that. I am stealing that one. Well, guys, we are right at the top of the hour. So we somehow we somehow managed to keep this on track and on the rails. And this was a super valuable conversation. So really, really appreciate all 4 of your time. And for any of you guys still listening, again, you know where to find us all, but I hope connections can be made after the fact. And if you want more of this, please let me know. If you have people in mind that would be great to come up on a panel, if you have topics in mind that you would love to get in a group and talk about, please let me know. Really trying to do my best to make sure that the topics are kind of front of mind for everyone that wants to listen. So with that, thank you very much, Julia, Gil, Saul, Justin. This was a lot of fun, and looking forward to the next one.
Appreciate
Thank
the
you for having
opportunity.
me.
Thanks,
All
man.
right.
Nice
Thanks
seeing
a lot.
you all. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye-bye.